Good. So the ending note was, let's say, a way also to describe what social change, can represent, or how social change can be obtained in contemporary politics in some way. Since social change, and now I come back a little bit to the discourse of contemporary art, is one of the main motors, it seems, apparently, in what we are experiencing in contemporary art. The way in which artistic practices always tries to embed in their discourses an idea of social change, and most of the times they question themselves how they can embed possibilities to get closer, or in some way to take advantage of these moments of mobilization. So I also would like to go to the questions that Davide has asked before. But before going to that, since you just finished your intervention, I would like to involve the audience as well.
Sure.
If there are since we just finished this intervention, if there are some direct questions or let's say intervention regarding what Laclau has just said. I see Tom that Anche Ren also that are here, and I'm sure also because in your intervention you spoke about a lot about the French current situation, and I'm sure that there could be some comments on that, and then maybe later we speak a bit more about this idea of the show of enacting populism in the MEDIÆSCAPE, and so also going a bit to what Davide has asked to me. I don't know if you sit on Anche Ren wants to.
No, yeah. I have. Well, I was in '68 in Nanterre. I am an old woman, and I was in the movement, and I don't agree completely with what you say, because I think first there is the problem of time. The '68 movement began in Nanterre about friends taken by the police in a demonstration in Vietnam, and before everything was completely blocked. There was nothing. And then it spread in well, there were movements but very, very separated from each other, and it went very quickly in May, but the time was very short. For instance, the last big demonstrations we had near Gare de Lyon on the 24th of May, which was the idea of going further, was completely mixed with some people who put the far in the, comment on appelle ça, la bourse, and de Gaulle put the army around Paris, and the movement changed that. Then, and Mendes France and Mitterrand came on the 29th in Charléty, and it was already over in a way, because there was no oil, there was no cigarettes, people were completely like that, and the government decided the Grenelle agreement to shut the movement. It was a very nice decision for them. And then, of course, all the working class movement went off, because there was this big negotiation, more money, more hours, hours free, and I don't remember the agreement. And after that, on the 14th of June, all the leftist movement were forbidden. And really, we were told by friends phoning, you are going to be arrested, you are going to be arrested. And so it was very difficult. The last people organized inside the art school, making the affiche. And And very soon after, well, it was a débandade in French, you know. And after the holidays, the Maoists began the idea of having terrorism in a way, but they were unable to have it. And the Trotsky, everybody shift. And I think the time to make what you said, the link between the social demand and the state, we had not that time, because when the election came, I think, I don't remember the dates, but it was a so short movement. And all of the movements, the students' movement were movements which from 65 were fighting against the old movement, the young communists against the old communists, the young Christian against the old Christian. And there was this change that all of those in Nanterre were together with a leader who was making everybody laugh. And so it's a very interesting story, but which is never, I think, spoke the right way, because you can't make a revolution in three days. The Russian, they made it in 12 years.
But don't you think that this also expressed the fragility of these pre-populist moments in history, no?
It was not so
I mean, if we want to keep the terminology as we have, we are talking now so far, because is it correct if we say that what Anne just described, so this testimony from this May 68 can also maybe be defined as this moment of pre-populist in which potentially a social demand, a mobilization could have accessed a political discourse that could be verticalized towards the state structure. But
what I wanted to say is that when you cut the head of the movement, as it was done, and it was done by the Nazists also, you have only then the pre-populists which can be seen, because all the head able to make a political work has been cut by repression. The communists were put in jail in Germany, some socialists also. The Dachau camp began in 1933, and so of course then the demands are there, and the head is something else because all the head is cut.
Mm-hmm. This.
Yeah, okay.
No, I just wanted to say, because this makes me think about this work that is representing also the visual identity of this project. So that is a triangle. Yeah. A triangle in which we have these let's say, opponents like the people and the elite, so in some way this possible verticalization that we were speaking about, but in between is there is the leader. Also a possibility to embed these social demands, this mobilization could be found now, as also you have described in the examples, can be found in the existence of a leader that can channel in this pre-populist movement social demands. I don't know if you can agree on that, or if you want to further.
It depends on what you are exactly meaning, because I would say, I'm not saying that the grassroots mobilization was totally responsible for what happened. Obviously, at the level of the political class in France, there were not splits enough. Although Mendès France represented something, but not strong enough to divide the political elite in such a way that an alternative politics would have been possible. Mm-hmm. And I think that the responsibility of the Communist Party was heavy there, because they...
And Mendès France appeared with Mitterrand, you know, and for people of my generation, at that time, Mitterrand was the main responsible of the Algerian war, so we couldn't believe in Mitterrand. And if Mendès France has been with a left political man, but not Mitterrand perhaps, but that was completely foolish.
Well, and see what Mitterrand became later on.
After, yes.
Yes, when Peronist mobilization started in Argentina in 1944, 1945, which was a massive working class mobilization, was around a colonel who was seen as a fascist member of the military elite. And however, he was totally overflown and transformed by the mobilization which was taking place. It's not a problem I think, of saying who was responsible. There was a structural situation which did not allow for other possibilities. But what we can say is that the lack of a possibility of a political influence of the mass mobilization over the institutional system was one of the structural deficiencies of all that situation which led to the disaster. Of course, the 68 had other influence in the social imaginary. It remains developing things for many years to come, but it didn't change the political alternatives. And I think in 68 there was the possibility of a sixth republic if the subjective forces would have been mature enough at different levels to carry out that. Perón started being an officer with strong fascist sympathies. And after almost 1 year of mobilization, he appeared himself in the balconies of the Ministry of Labor saying, proletarians of the world unite. So people are changing circumstances, and in third world countries, many times, think for instance in the Arab regimes, the Arab nationalism and so on, sharp ideological exchanges take place in some circumstances.
Mussolini itself, no? Mussolini itself changed. It was socialist, part of the gauche socialist Mussolini, no? And then became.
Yes, and it happened the opposite during the War of Liberation.
Yeah.
Many former fascist people became communists. Because in fact the War of Liberation in Italy was a very funny episode, because the Mussolini had organized the Salon Republic in the northern of Italy, while the king with the Badoglio and all the other forces were advancing to Rome. And he had to give ideological legitimacy to his regime. And the way of doing this legitimacy was to appeal to the radical republican tradition of Mazzini, Garibaldi, and so on. Mazzini appearing the postal stamp of the regime and so on. And so Togliatti, the general secretary of the Communist Party at that moment, spoke through Radio Milano. I must say Radio Milano was at Moscow at the time, no? But, and he said, they are appealing to the right symbols of the Italian people without any legitimacy, because we are the true Garibaldian, the true Mazzinian. And to some extent, the ideological struggle in the months in which the War of Liberation took place in northern Italy was a struggle between communists and fascists for the absorption of the same type of symbols. At that point, the communists won, as the fascists had won after the First World War. But there are, in all populist situations, this area in which there is a no man's land in which symbols can move in absolutely different directions. In American populism, to give you an example, at the end of the 19th century, you had the populist movement, which was the movement of the farmers, which was a discourse of the small man against big wealth. And that was more or less a left-wing discourse. And it remained as such, even if the populist movement was defeated, in the background of the political imaginary of America. The New Deal was fed by this type of symbols, and even the American Communist Party was using the same kind of symbols. The electoral campaign of Wallace, which was not the later Wallace, the previous, the one who was vice president of Roosevelt, who was a campaign organized by the Communist Party in America, was using this type of symbols. Now, in the 1950s, there is a shift. The discourse remains also the discourse of the small man against the big power, but the nature of the big power has changed. It was no longer the bank, the railway system, the big wealth, but it was the liberal elite of the West. And so an appeal to Americanness, maintaining the formal structure of the same discourse, however, sees this whole shift. With this, I'm not suggesting in the least that Marine Le Pen is going to become a left-wing populist. What I'm suggesting is that at some point in history, the situation is so unclear in terms of the ideological determinant that the thing can move in many different directions.
Yeah. And I think that now we are speaking. I mean, I've seen the. I saw the image while you were speaking of Peron, let's say, addressing the proletariat, or the stamps with Mussolini, or I think about the use of Twitter in the Egyptian revolution. We're all talking about medias. Now we are talking about a medium that conveys certain images that help to build a certain political discourse, or to reinforce them in what we might call in the mediascape. So this fluxus of images, and that leads me to think, not to again to the dynamic of the show, but also to this idea that I also let's say take in the discourse of the exhibition, about the possibility to affect, let's say, the imagery. So to quote Yves Sitton, that is here in front of me, to try to articulate positive and emancipatory myths through images, through the articulation, the creation of images, and through the use of media. So, but have you ever? My question in inviting you while I thought about this conversation, I was thinking if you ever considered this element now when you were analyzing, also taking historical episodes, analyzing the way in which certain media have played a role in determining certain results in history. If you ever taken this into account, or how in certain cases you have seen this use being significant.
Well, I can say something about my experience, but perhaps Davide.
No, go ahead, and then I will.
No, the point is that the more we are advancing in the type of social evolution in which our societies are moving, the more we are confronted with the fact that the media are a factor of power of the first importance. So without establishing some kind of control over the media and the way in which the information is transmitted, it's impossible to implement some kind of a program. For example, for instance, the Argentinian government at the moment has passed a law of the press by which the monopoly by the big private companies, the group of Clarín and other groups, have been deprived of the control of the distribution of paper. And the state has established a committee in which different sectors, representative sectors, are going to intervene there. So there is a demonopolization of the access to information. Now, with this, without this type of intervention, the process, the media would be almighty, and if they are almighty, there is very little that the government, which tries to move in a progressive direction, can do. For instance, give you a second example. In Venezuela, there was a lot of international outcry because a television channel had been denied the renewal of its license at some point. Well, what people don't say is that television channels had been advocating for months and months for a coup d'etat in Venezuela. So you can imagine what would happen if the Washington Post in America started advocating for a coup d'etat. In 5 minutes it would have been closed and everybody would have gone to jail. They were allowed in Venezuela to continue doing this for months and months, and finally the coup d'etat took place and it failed. And after that, the television channel continued there. They were no longer advocating a coup d'etat, but they refused to diffuse the speeches of the president. So you can imagine if the CNN refused to transmit the speeches of Obama, what would happen? Well, in the end, the government decided not to renew the license when it expired, but they can continue transmitting through cable or through other means. The thing is that they are no longer in there, but that is a measure which should have been taken not by the national government but by the Minister of Public Health, because without this struggle against the control of the media by the big monopolistic power, there is no possibility of long-term democratization of the society.
I want to bring another example before passing the word to Davide. In one of the researches that we have encountered in the Enacting Populism project, for example, there was a group of Foundland, a group of designers and artists that analyzed how in the Netherlands the rise of Wilders was connected to the fact that the main funder of the campaign of Wilders was the owner of Endemol. Endemol is the biggest production company for reality shows. And during the years of the campaign of Wilders, they increased the number of reality shows that were speaking about Dutch identity, of security. Security in one country is the safest country in Europe, where the level of crimes is equal to, not to zero, but it's very low. And they increased in 15 years time this control, indirect control over the let's say the everyday imagery of the Netherlands. So, and in this case, in a much more liberal context, as the Dutch one, but in general the European one, these kind of things, you use the word control, but I would use the word regulamentation, no? In the sense that really to create a better regulamentation of what is the way in which we access the information, the creation of information, and also not only information but imagery, because the reality shows are, I mean, nowadays for sure much more impacting, the masses than what a newspaper or a radio program can do, probably. I don't know if Davide or wants to.
Well, yeah, this last problem is
sorry.
enormous.
Endemol is also in Italy, for example, Berlusconi owns Endemol. It's just to put a note to this, to what I said. So we see another example that is similar.
Yes, all these questions could lead us to raise the fundamental question for an Italian like me and you. How was Berlusconi possible in Italy in the last 20 years? But this is a very serious and complicated issue. And I would like to go back to something else, something that Ernesto told us before about. Let me say that I completely disagree from you when you speak of the so-called Arab Spring, and you characterize it as a pre-populist movement, which would mean a pre-political movement from your point of view. Maybe we do not like this kind of political movements, but I think that we have to respect them as fully political movement, even though these movements are religiously oriented. I mean, the recent elections in Tunisia.
Well, in Tunisia there has been a political crystallization.
Okay, so
more
okay,
than
okay.
in Egypt has not taken place.
But maybe in Egypt there is a problem with the present government. There is a real struggle, political and also military struggle going on in Egypt. But anyway, this was just a remark. Now let's go back to the question of left-wing populism in Europe. This missing populism in Europe. You were telling us that according to you, the horizontal expansion of the social demands has to be transformed into something else, into a challenge to the political system as a whole. My question is, from your point of view, can this be done through regular political elections? I mean, when you're speaking of seizing power, are you meaning seizing power through democratic elections? This is the first question. The second question is another one. It is about the scale, what I would call the scale of politics. Can we think of emancipative politics in Europe today on the national scale? Or should we move to a different scale, to a European scale, where all the important decisions about European populations and peoples are taken? And this leads me to another question, which is which regards, I think, one of the cores of your political theory, the question of borders. For instance, I do not believe in global social movements. Why? Because I believe in the capital role of borders in politics. So, my question is, from your point of view, do political borders of the people or of the peoples pre-exist to the definition and constructions of the peoples, or are these borders defined and constructed along with the people?
The second.
The second one.
Yeah.
And the first question was,
Okay, shall we,
Okay.
or you want to?
No. I'm.
Okay, let me, my memory is very bit fragile. It's not that I have Alzheimer, but I have...
What do you mean? The first question was, what do you mean by seizing power? By the expression seizing power, by transforming the horizontal expansion of the social demands into a challenge to the political system. Is it possible through democratic elections in Europe today, or are you thinking of other alternatives?
I think that there is no alternative meaning. There is no Leninist seizure of power in the traditional sense. This is not the problem. What I think is democratic elections are not going to be the only means of achieving a change of power, but at the same time, they are going to play a certain role. I don't know what is Mélenchon going to be his political future. It does not look very bright as at the moment, according to what everybody says. But what he has done, which is to try to construct a party and to intervene in formal politics, is not something that I'm necessarily against, even if his project for other reasons is doomed. But what I think is that political construction is a very complicated process which takes place at various different levels. For instance, in Italy, one of the problems is that nobody believes in the all institutional system and system of parties as a way of channeling social protests. And in many other parts of Europe, symptoms of that phenomenon are also taking place with different degrees. For instance, the Linke in Germany is an attempt to act within the parliamentary system, and in the German situation, I don't think they are wrong in trying to do exactly that. In the case of Italy, I'm rather more skeptic. I think that it will have to be some kind of confluence of political mobilization taking place at different levels of the social spectrum, that at some moment that would crystallize in a political alternative. Well, I hope so, but I see it as a rather distant possibility at the moment. What I was trying to make was a more general point, that I don't believe either in the pure parliamentarization of power or in the idea of a base grassroots democracy which try to evacuate the level of the state as a level of struggle. Now, in Italy, you had moments in which this negotiation functioned for a short period. Togliatti was one moment in which this negotiation between the two levels worked relatively well, but that well is over clearly. And so the problem of the politicization of movement of social protest es important. I think the indignados en España, in Spain, if they continue simply with the politic of total protest outside all kind of institutions, they will degrade more or less quickly. They don't have any possibility of doing that. If on the other hand, this social protest is transformed into something which I don't know exactly in Spain how it could work, I don't know the Spanish political system in such detail, but for instance, action at the level of local council, of school cooperatives, of different levels, which at some moment can be brought into a different alternative that could lead to something, but it's not a possibility that I see as an immediate one. In Latin America, yes. In Latin America, clearly the integration between the two levels is producing very positive results.
What you are calling the integration of the two levels
yes.
has something to do with the question I was raising before, the question of borders. Because borders, institutional borders, let us call borders as institution or institutional borders. It seems to me that in this kind of delicate relationship between movement and institution, or movement and in theory construction of the people and borders, there is something always shifting and being not clear to me. It is not clear at the level of your theory, which is the theory that allows us to raise this question, from my point of view, but which is not still clear. To me, this is a very important question, because going back to the question of to the problem of Europe, I do not think that solution for a country such as Italy will be a different national politics. I don't think that this will be the solution. Solution could be the move to a different scale of political discursivity. What in Rome a few years ago you called a kind of European populism when we met Tronti, maybe you remember.
Yes, and Etienne Balibar is advocating that as well.
Yeah. And what do you think about this possibility of European populism?
To tell you the truth, at the moment of the vote on the European Constitution, I supported the yes, not the no, because I thought that the no was some kind of parochialism, which was not going to lead to any kind of alternative politics. In fact, nothing has come out of the no 3 years after that event. And it was not alone. For instance, people like Tony Negri also supported the yes at that moment. So I think that the possibility of developing identities which are wider than the actual institutional border is something which is definitely in the agenda. The point is that the social borders are not determined by institutional borders, but the institutional border had their efficacy. So one has to move 1 foot outside them and 1 foot inside. And I remember this Italian, what was the name, Chantal, of that Italian who spoke about going between borders? You were very enthusiastic about at some point about that. It's
Cacciari.
Cacciari. Cacciari spoke about trying to establish alliance between social forces which were over the national limits. And I don't think the national limits are very fluid limits which all the times are being overpassed by mobilization of different kind, and that I think is going to happen in the future. So that is why I answer to your question whether the social limit is what create the borders, and I think that is so. We have social mobilization which are transgressing borders all the time. And that the future of Europe, I think, is there.
Okay,
You agree?
I agree. I would like to add something else, but after...
I want to bring a question from Yusiton that I mentioned a few times.
Maybe going in the same direction as what you were saying about the possibility of European populism, and what you said before about media and the mediascape. And I think one way to ask the question is, what can there be, what is there already working as a common mediascape space for for the development of a European opinion or of European debate. And this, it seems to me, is very much lacking. We have on the other side, we do have The Economist that everybody reads worldwide, and I think something like The Economist has a huge power on shaping the agenda, on bringing solution, on pushing certain type of things which are not populist and are not what we're usually interested in. But the
and are
equivalent...
not democratic.
I'm sorry?
And are not democratic.
That remains to be seen. But the equivalent of The Economist on the side of the left is one major thing which is missing, which may be developing on the internet. There are efforts to do something like that, but it's not taking, it doesn't have traction. And that would be so I think looking at it from the mediascape point of view, I think it's crucial to try to answer that, because as long as there is no common debate synchronized between different nations, I think it will be very different. Affecting people's life, it would be very different, very difficult to have something like that. Now, my question on what the three of you were saying, talking about left-wing populism. How do you define, so populism we understood, how do you define left-wing populism as opposed to nationalistic, right-wing, etc., or religious populism? Is it the type of policies and programs that are advocated and that are the goal of taking power, more social equality, etc., etc.? Is it only that? Is it also in the way discourse is constructed, in the way these chain of equivalences are constructed, in a certain respect for truth, for people's rationality, as opposed to oversimplifications and sort of sacrificial victim in the foreigner? What is I guess on the first aspect of it, there's different social policies promoted by the left as opposed to the right, we all agree. Is there a type of discourse or a type of bringing this agglutination of demands that would be specific to the left as opposed to the right, or not? That would be my question. And I keep in mind something, maybe Anne, you can help me, a famous quote by Deleuze, I don't know exactly how it goes, saying, what is it to be left-wing? It's to make sure people think, or to do what you can so that people think. And there is something, I think, resistant in the notion of populism, and I follow you all the way. I'm a very big admirer of what you're doing, so it's not really a criticism, it's more a question. Within the notion of populism and this construction of chain of equivalences, we have the idea that in order to get some traction, you need to simplify things. You need to just not to bring some violence to the complexity of reality. I see a tension between this, which is built in populism, as I see it, and this other thing I want to believe in, that being left-wing is to help people think complexity as it is?
Okay. The question was addressed to both of us.
Yeah, or anyone.
Or to humanity in general, crossing borders. No, I think what is a left-wing populism has to be defined contextually. That is to say, in terms of what can divide society from the point of view of a dominant discourse. I think one of the main features of a left-wing populist discourse is in the rejection of the neoliberal model. Most of the, all the right, but at the same time most of the left has been catched by a neoliberal logic which has dominated the politics of Europe over the, and not only of Europe, over the last 20 years. Now, an alternative economic policy from this point of view is a first defining feature of a left-wing populism. This neoliberalism has created many points of rupture and antagonism, and bringing all these points of rupture and antagonism into an alternative politics is a first defining feature. Then there are other features which are more contextually depending on the society. For instance, in many Latin American countries, the defense of human rights against the military dictatorship which existed there, and bringing the people, the former military torturers to court, has been a defining feature of left-wing populism. And one can make an enumeration, but the enumeration is going to be slightly different in different contexts. But the opposition to the dominant neoliberal model of economic management, I think, is a universal feature of any kind of politics which is called left-wing populism. Christina Kirchner had a long discussion with Sarkozy, which was maintaining limits of cordiality, but was sharp in the confrontation, because she told him that what they are doing in Greece is a total nonsense, that they solved the crisis in Argentina, where the effects of the economic crisis are not felt practically, simply by ignoring the IMF formula and by having a policy of expansion of demand and redistribution of income. And well, the answer of Sarkozy was, well, that perhaps could work for Argentina, but definitely not for Greece, because we have a strict limit to what can be done in terms of the solidarity within the Eurozone. Well, but if they don't change that type of politics, there is not going to be reversal of the money, of the model. And there you have people like Paul Krugman or Paul Stiglitz, who are advocating alternative models, which are not ultra-leftist models, are simply models of some economic rationality which do not pass through this monetaristic logic. But what they are doing is multiplying the effects of the crisis at the moment. So that would be one big issue. Then there are some issues which are not important in Latin America but are important in Europe. The policy vis-à-vis immigration is something which is absolutely central in this kind of society. And well, the agenda is shifting from one area to the other, no?
But again, the fact that the type of populism that has developed in Europe over the last 20 years is a right-wing, nationalistic, anti-foreigner discourse. I think we have to ask ourselves why, and ask ourselves whether a left-wing populism can really take shape without integrating that. And is it acceptable to integrate that? In which direction? You see, not neoliberal. So does protectionism in terms of economics, do we include that into what brings the chain of equivalence? Protectionism against what? Against China, against Chinese, against, I mean, it's a very slippery slope, which is life. Life is slippery, so that's fine. But that's why in thinking in terms of the content, not neoliberalism, I understand, is there another way in terms of the form of discourse that we use in this left-wing populism that could help us characterize what's acceptable, what's not?
Yes.
But I don't know, I'm asking.
Well, I'm not that much either, but what I think is that any kind of populism which is chauvinistically oriented is going to be right-wing. If it is possible to create a European populism, as some people are advocating, I was mentioning Bolivar before, but there is another, for instance, Yanis Stavrakakis in that book, The La Kenyan Left, has spoken about the need to create a sort of European populist identification. Well, that is not which is at hand, because the notion of Europe is connected to bureaucratic processes, Brussels and so on. There is no Jeanne d'Arc of Europe emerging in the present conjuncture. But if it could be advanced towards that in the future, I don't know exactly by what means, but there you Europeans have to find a way, I think would be an advance. Among other things, because Europe cannot operate in the international scene with any kind of efficacy if it is not participating in it as a unified bloc. In 20 years' time, China would have superseded by far America in being the main economic power in the world. There are emerging powers, India, Brazil, and so on. Latin America around the Mercosur has a chance if it manages to consolidate it, and the only chance of Europe is that it presents itself as one more bloc, so that in a multipolar system, Europe can speak with one voice. But the process leading in that direction is very slow, and all the xenophobic nationalism, which tend to undermine the idea of Europe, are the very definition of what right-wing populism is today.
I don't know if there are any other questions from the...
Yeah, I have a question. Would you think that populism is fundamentally reactionary?
Is it what?
Would you say that populism is fundamentally reactionary in the sense that it has a tendency to gather people around the opposition to an enemy like capitalism or foreigners or dominant class? Would you come up to that kind of...
Well, there is no populism without the division of society into two camps.
Reaction?
So you have to create an enemy and you have to create a pole of agglutination of people. That is what is the very definition of populism. So without a sharp antagonism dividing society into camps, there is no populist politics.
Okay. Before closing this very, very interesting and full of meaningful contribution meeting, I'd like to just quickly answer to Davide, because there was a question lingering for me, and it was about what the interferences that I speak about in the project are about. And the idea, what we haven't mentioned, is that the title is not Enacting Populism in the MEDIÆSCAPE, but in the MEDIA-escape. Because the idea is that it's a game of words, and it doesn't want to create any kind of big theory behind it, but it's a way to in some way frame the idea that there is a traditional way to understand the MEDIASCAPE and to understand the media, and inside that there are sort of escapisms that, for example, were mentioned before when we were talking about internet, and it's not by chance that many, let's say, governmental choices, laws are trying to limit, to let's say, make the internet space a traditional media space. So in that sense, the interference is about let's say, escaping the traditional understanding of the media. And on the other hand, I mean, the idea of the artistic practice is to create a representation of this situation, is also in order to point out the possibility to frame better, to create a better understanding of, and awareness regarding these possibilities. I just mentioned one work that will be presented that is about a referendum of popular initiative that is not existing in France as such. I mean, there's no popular initiative referendum. There's only in Italy, in Austria, and there will be, by chance, but starting with the 1st of April 2012, there could be the possibility of a referendum of popular initiative in Europe through internet. So European citizens will be able to create a referendum signing online and to propose, let's say, through a referendum, questions to the European Parliament. But apart from that, for example, the Anna Scalfi-Genter work about this referendum is about the question of land grabbing, and is about underlying the phenomenon of neoliberal appropriation of African territories, of territories in which a neoliberal dynamic is not active yet on, let's say, on the land. And since 2008, with the land grabbing phenomenon, a lot of, let's say, appropriation of new parts of land in Africa and in other places are happening, and in some way is about understanding how a neoliberal scheme is being imposed over territories in which that kind of understanding of the economy of the land was not present. So in this regard, for example, this interference from Anna Scalfi that will rent for 5 years through her work a piece of land that will be free from this dynamic. So all around, maybe there will be Chinese or Russian investors practicing this land grabbing, but this territory will be for 5 years given to local farmers, workers. And in this way, for example, there is a way to interfere with what is, say, a status quo dynamic, to go back also to the terminology we have used, and through this interference to create an awareness, an understanding of what is ongoing. And this idea of the media, of a new narrative and discourse over the media is very important in order to understand how these possibilities can be enacted, can be practiced, I think, because otherwise we still go back to this idea of the media in a traditional sense without understanding which could be the real possibilities of that. With this, I thank everybody for the time that you have dedicated to us, and I hope you found this meeting as interesting as I found it. And I just remind to you the next week, on Friday, on the 17th, there will be the opening of the show here at Kadist with the 12 international artists, 6 new works, and you're all welcome.
And this, we can just have a talk and pursue the discussion with a drink, and thank you for coming.